Hi folks, welcome to the Photo Buff. I was intrigued by this lens and went online to find more information about it, but I couldn't find a whole lot. So I decided to review it. This is the MS Optics 73mm f1.5 Sonnetar lens. So, first, the disclaimers. I'm not affiliated with any company or store. My reviews are not scientific, and all opinions in this video are solely mine. So, MS Optics. It's not a big company. It's not an old company. In fact, it's so small that it's remarkably located in the basement of Mr. Miyazaki Sadayasu's house, northeast of Tokyo, Japan. And the MS in the name of the company is, of course, his initials. Now, Mr. Miyazaki, not to be confused with the famous manga anime artist, was retrofitting Contax G lenses to Leica M mount back in the 1990s. And that's how he became very well known. In 2006, he released his first proprietary lens, a Sonar type 50mm f1.3. And since then, he's continued to add lenses to his lineup, as you can see here. Because MS Optics is essentially a one-man operation, as you might imagine, production quantities are small. For example, the serial number on this lens, I don't know if you can see it right there, it's 027. That's a pretty low number. And most new MS Optics lenses fit M mount cameras, and this lens looks great on my Leica M3, but because of its focal length and it loves high resolution sensors, I prefer to use it on my Sony A7R Mark IV. As with most rangefinder lenses, and this one is no different, focusing distance is roughly 0.7, 0.8 meters, but a close focus adapter can shorten that distance to about 0.4 meters or 16 inches, making this lens much more versatile. This close focus adapter is made by CN Scope and can be found online for about $50. So this lens comes with plastic end caps. This is the front cap. It also comes with this aluminum hood. Like that. And the cool thing about this hood, because it screws on, you can turn it, you can reverse it and carry it around this way just so you don't lose it. It also adds maybe a little more protection to the outer barrel. A lens this compact, well, it comes in an equally compact box. And inside the box, you will receive some unique literature. Maybe you can see it a little better if I put it in front of the lens. And it corresponds to this particular lens, as you can see here. It has a serial number of 027. But wait, there's more. Here is his performance summary explaining his inspirations and reasons for making this lens the way he did. Let's talk about specifications. Well, this prime lens has 5 elements in 4 groups. It's fully manual, no electronics. It has multi-coated optics on all surfaces. Miyazaki-san uses a proprietary optical coating formula that transmits light at about 97.5 More light, the better. This lens is a lightweight, weighing in at just 197 grams, by far the lightest lens in its class. For example, the Leica Summicron 75mm f2 weighs a whopping 430 grams. The Voigtlander 75mm f1.5 Nikon, a spherical, weighs 350 grams. My glass of water weighs more than this lens. As you can see, the Sonnetar is small. It's less than 2 inches in diameter and 2¼ inches long. The filter size is common, 49 millimeters. Aperture range is from f1.5 to f16. Aperture movement is unclicked. Let's try it right here. It's unclicked. And a bit over dampened in my opinion. More on that later. The aperture is a premium 16 blade. I don't know if you can see that very well. Let me try and position it. This is all the way open at f1.5. If I close it down, you can see it. 16 blades. It creates almost perfectly spherical iris at all stops. Focus throw is short, about 90 degrees. This lens is not weather sealed. Okay, let's talk about fit and finish. It feels solid, but not tank solid. Solid as a tank evokes thick and heavy for me. I describe this as precision solid, small and light, but not flimsy, if that makes any sense. Obviously, it's machined to high tolerances. The fit and finish it just feels premium. There's no real looseness. It moves smoothly. Text on the barrel is engraved and paint filled in black and red on the silver version. I believe the lettering is white on the black version. The front element is slightly recessed, but it produces a prominent gleam, as you can kind of see here. Functionality. Well, the focus. Instead of a focusing ring that rotates independently of the aperture, the entire lens barrel, including the aperture ring, rotates when you focus this lens. You see that? The whole thing just turning. This is the aperture ring, and it's turning along with it. Okay, remember that. So in the aperture, when you move that, because it's a bit over dampened, it's going to also move the entire barrel, which therefore moves the focus in and out. So if you focus first and then you want to adjust the aperture, you just can't do it effectively, because no matter what you try to do, it's going to change your focus a little bit. So you'll have to change the aperture and then refocus. So with this lens, it's really aperture setting first and then focus and frame and shoot. It just really doesn't make any sense to focus first and do the aperture. You wouldn't normally do that anyway. You would only do that if you were on a tripod, I suppose, and taking a shot of scenery that you want to shoot in different apertures. And if you try to do that with this lens, it's going to be a little bit frustrating. I think there's a solution to this type of design though, and it's not necessarily a fix for any of the existing lenses, but I think that for future lenses, if Mr. Miyazaki likes this design, obviously he does, there might be another option for the dampening. And I don't know if this dampening can be loosened a little bit, but if it was loosened just enough to where you can move it without moving the entire barrel, then that would solve the problem. There are other lenses that have this sort of design, and their apertures are looser so that you can focus and then set aperture, but sometimes the aperture is so loose that you can knock it out a little bit just accidentally. So that's the other side to that solution. Having said all that, And because this aperture is declicked and it's a wonderful 16 blade, it really isn't good for video, unfortunately. Let's talk about image quality. I think the IQ from this lens is very good. It produces fine tonal gradations or contrast, so you can achieve tri-dimensional depth, or that 3D pop, as they say. Color rendition is a bit cool as compared to, say, this Pentax FA 77mm f1.8. And you can see the size difference. Look at, these are very similar lenses in specifications, but the Pentax is a lot heavier and it's wider in diameter. It's about the same height. Oh God, I'm not getting it out. I'm sorry, guys. It's about the same height, but it's a lot fatter and it's a lot heavier. But, you know, despite the cooler color rendition from this lens, I tend to adjust color in post anyway, no matter what lens I'm using, so it's not really a deal breaker for me. Wide open, the center is reasonably sharp while the edges are soft. Miyazaki had always intended this lens for portraits, so when stopped down though, the sharpness noticeably increases across the image. Flare and ghosting is well controlled. I had to really try to get the image to wash out like this, you know, just basically taking shots of the sun. Ghosting artifacts are difficult to create with this lens. They're practically nil. Bokeh. One of the strengths of this lens is the creamy, dreamy, unfocused background, and especially the bokeh balls, which are spherical from edge to edge. None of my other lenses can do this. Usually the bokeh balls on the other lenses, you know, they become more elliptical in shape towards the edges, but not this lens. It's round, round, round. Really a great quality bokeh ball on this lens. With its 16 blade aperture, sun stars look pretty good when stopped down. Imaging flaws, chromatic aberration is evident on contrasty silhouettes in the form of purple fringing. This is not an spherical lens, so CA should be expected, but it's manageable and correctable in post. The mild barrel distortion is hardly noticeable unless you're shooting brick walls straight on and purposely looking for it. Let's talk value though. This 73mm f1.5 Sonnetar is not a bargain at around $1,400 US. And I'm saying not a bargain for some, might be a bargain for others. It just depends on what you're after. But I've seen like new copies for as low as $1,000 on the used market. The high price point of this lens, however, will cause some photo buffs to consider alternatives, and there are a lot of less expensive alternatives in this focal length, but they're going to be bigger and heavier and not without performance sacrifices of their own. So there's always some trade-off there. I would say the closest comparative lens to this Sonnetar in performance at a slightly lower price is Voigtlander's 75mm f1.5 Nikon, a spherical at I think around $900. The Voigtlander also has nice bokeh, but the bokeh balls are elliptical at the edges and with onion ring effect as a result of its spherical design. So again, there are some trade-offs. So the cons that I have, my primary complaint is the tightly dampened aperture. I would like the aperture to be a bit looser, just enough so it doesn't cause the entire barrel to turn when you set the aperture. Second con is there's no weather sealing, but that's not necessarily a deal breaker for me because I'm mostly a fair weather shooter anyway, and I use a lot of legacy lenses that typically aren't weather sealed. More of an acknowledgement than a con, this lens is pricey at $1,000 to $1,400 US. You can find alternatives for less, good alternatives actually, for much less than that. So my closing opinions, this manual prime lens to me is very special. The images are loaded with character in a good way. The bokeh balls are round from edge to edge. Because it's so compact, this lens takes up little space in my bag. And if you shoot portraits or products and are looking for a manual prime in this focal length, this might be the lens for you. Well, I hope this information was useful to you. And in closing, here's a collection of some photos I've taken with this lens. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon on The Photo Buff.